Imagine this. You are walking through a city, maybe on your way to work, and you feel this low hum of tension. It is not about any one thing, not a specific problem you can name, but a general sense of being on edge, a feeling that something is just a little bit off. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, of having your day planned out in your head, only to have the entire world seem to push back against it. The traffic is terrible, your coffee is cold, your inbox is overflowing. That hum gets louder. For a lot of men today, that is not just a bad day, that is the background music of life, a constant, low-grade anxiety. Now picture a different scene. It is the middle of the 1800s. A man named Henry David Thoreau decides to do something that seemed completely irrational to everyone around him. He leaves the town of Concord and builds a small, simple cabin by a pond called Walden. He is not running away, at least not in the way we might think. He is running towards something. He is trying to answer a simple, profound question. What is really essential for life? He believed that modern life, even back then, was filled with too much noise, too many complications, and that it was making people sick with worry. His core idea is surprisingly simple. We have filled our lives with so much stuff, so many obligations and opinions, that we have lost touch with the one thing that can truly steady us, the wild world around us. Thoreau wrote, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." That is the big quote, the secret. But what does that actually mean for you right now, today? It is not about literally going to live in the woods, though a weekend camping trip would not hurt. It is about a shift in perspective. It is about recognizing the natural tension inside your own mind. We all have this instinctive thinking, this voice that is constantly narrating, judging, planning, and worrying. It is the voice that gets offended in traffic, that replays an argument from 3 days ago, that tells you you are not doing enough. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they feel safe, even if those ideas are the very source of our stress. The belief that we must always be productive, that we must always be in control, that we must have everything figured out. But Thoreau points to something else, a deeper awareness that we all have access to. It is the part of you that notices the instinctive voice without getting completely swept away by it. It is the part of you that can stand by a lake, or even just look at a single tree on your street, and for a moment, all that mental chatter just stops. You are just looking. You are just hearing the birds. You are just there. In that moment, the anxiety loses its power. It is still there, but it is not everything. The wildness does not judge you. It does not demand anything from you. It just exists. And by spending time with it, even in small ways, you tap into that same steady, unwavering presence within yourself. Remember when you were a kid and you realized a belief you held was not quite true? Maybe you were absolutely certain there was a monster in your closet, and one night, your dad showed you it was just a shadow from a streetlight. That moment of realization, that shift, is what Thoreau is inviting us to experience as adults. Our modern anxieties are often like that monster. They feel incredibly real and terrifying, but they are often just shadows cast by the complicated lights of our modern world. We fool ourselves into thinking the shadow is the real thing. We think the anxiety is a permanent part of us, rather than a reaction to a life that is out of balance. Thoreau's principle is about gently questioning those shadows. It is about creating a little space between the constant thinking and the deeper you that is simply aware. This is not about fighting your thoughts. It is about changing your relationship to them. When you walk in a park, or even just sit and really look at a plant, you are not engaging with the world of deadlines and opinions. You are engaging with something older, slower, and far more stable. Your instinctive mind might still try to pull you back, to remind you of that email you need to send. But the more you practice turning toward the wildness, the easier it becomes to let that thought float by like a cloud without letting it storm over your whole day. This is not a grand, complicated philosophy. It is a practical tuning of your attention. It is choosing to notice the way light filters through leaves instead of immediately checking your phone. It is feeling the solid ground under your feet during a walk instead of getting lost in a spiral of what-ifs. This cracks open the entire journey, a path that Thoreau walked and that we are all invited to follow. It is a natural three-phase process that begins not in the wilderness, but right where we are. We start by seeing things simply. The world feels heavy with obligations, notifications, and a constant hum of expectation. Our initial view is often one of frustration, a feeling of being trapped in a system that demands immediate reactions. A work email sparks instant irritation. A minor traffic delay feels like a personal affront. We are living in what Thoreau would call a state of quiet desperation, reacting to life rather than engaging with it. This is the shore we push off from, the familiar discomfort that finally prompts us to seek something different, something quieter and more substantial. But as we step onto this path, perhaps by taking a walk without our phone, or simply sitting in a park during lunch, we inevitably enter the confusing middle. This is the phase where things get complicated, and it is precisely here where most of us feel uneasy during transitions. The initial simplicity vanishes, replaced by a tangled mess of old habits fighting new intuitions. You might be someone who resists change at first, finding the silence uncomfortable or the lack of constant stimulation strangely anxiety-producing. This is the thicket, the swamp that Thoreau described not as an obstacle to avoid, but as the very source of richness and strength. He believed that in wildness is the preservation of the world, and that includes the wild, untamed parts of our own inner landscape. The challenge isn't to clear the swamp, but to learn how to navigate it, to understand that this friction is what forges a stronger self. The old knee-jerk reactions, the snapped comment, the defensive posture, still arise, but now they feel clumsy and out of tune. It is in this tough middle ground that a subtle shift begins. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately. That space, however small, is where the transformation occurs. It's the difference between Thoreau's contrast of a life of reaction versus a life of principle. The knee-jerk reaction is the easy, well-worn path of least resistance, but it leads nowhere new. The thoughtful response is the path less traveled, the one we must sometimes carve ourselves, guided by a deeper internal compass we are just beginning to rediscover. We start noticing the impulse to check the phone when bored and choose to look at a tree instead. We feel the heat of anger rise in a conversation and, instead of unleashing it, we take a breath. These are small, almost imperceptible victories, but they accumulate. This practice, this stumbling through the undergrowth, eventually leads to the new clarity. It doesn't arrive with a bang, but like the slow rising of the sun, illuminating a landscape we now understand. The chaos of the middle phase starts to resolve into a new pattern. The things that once caused immense anxiety begin to lose their power. not because they've vanished, but because our relationship to them has fundamentally changed. We are no longer buffeted by every wind. We have discovered an internal anchor. The thoughtful response becomes more default than the exception. We find that we can engage with the modern world without being consumed by it. We can work without our identity being solely tied to our productivity. We can socialize without the fear of missing out, because we are no longer missing ourselves. This is the integration Thoreau found at Walden. The ability to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, not by escaping society, but by building a self so resilient that it can move within society without being eroded by it. The wildness he championed becomes our own inner resource, a perpetual source of renewal and calm amidst the noise. Through this discomfort, we begin to see the faint outline of a path forward, one we might have missed entirely if we'd remained in our comfortable, familiar ruts. It's in this raw, unvarnished state that our defenses are down and our usual scripts fail us. We're forced to listen more intently, not just to the world around us, but to the quiet, often ignored voice within. This isn't about a sudden, blinding flash of insight, but rather a slow dawning, a gradual recalibration of our inner compass. The friction we feel is a sign of growth, the mental equivalent of muscles aching after a long overdue workout. It's proof we're stretching beyond our previous limits, even if it feels more like breaking in the moment. This process of stretching and re-evaluating often leads us to question the very narratives we've built our lives upon. We start to see how many of our choices, from the careers we pursue to the ways we engage in relationships, are subtly influenced by a desire to fit a certain story, one that may not be authentically ours. This is where the Barnum effect can play such a curious role in our lives. We absorb these broad, generalized descriptions of personality, from astrology signs to online quizzes, and we unconsciously mold ourselves to fit them, seeking the comfort of a defined identity. We become the hero of a story someone else wrote, wearing a costume that was designed for a generic character, not for us. The discomfort arises when the costume begins to chafe, when the lines of the character feel too tight and the plot feels predictable and uninspiring. As we sit with this discomfort, a powerful shift begins to occur. We start to disentangle our authentic selves from the character we've been playing. We question the motivations behind our actions. Am I doing this because I truly value it? Or because it aligns with the story I've been telling about who I am? This isn't an act of rebellion for its own sake, but a quiet, determined search for integrity. It's the process of aligning our outward actions with our inward values, and it requires a courageous level of self-honesty. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier once this process begins, not because the options are less complex, but because your internal measuring stick, your core values, becomes clearer and more reliable. The noise of external expectations starts to fade into the background, and you can finally hear your own inner voice guiding you. This newfound clarity has a ripple effect that touches every corner of our existence. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much because they're no longer internalized as personal failures or attacks. A traffic jam is just a traffic jam, not a cosmic sign that the universe is against you. A critical comment from a colleague can be evaluated on its own merits, rather than triggering a cascade of self-doubt about your entire professional identity. This is the practical freedom that emerges from this internal work. It's the liberation from the constant, exhausting performance of being the person you thought you were supposed to be. The energy that was once spent maintaining that facade is suddenly available for more meaningful pursuits, for creativity, for deeper connection, for simply being present in your own life. This journey inward, as challenging as it is, fundamentally rewires our relationship with the world. We begin to engage from a place of choice rather than obligation, from curiosity rather than fear. Our interactions become more genuine because we are no longer trying to project an image or protect a fragile ego. We can show up, imperfect and real, and that authenticity gives others the permission to do the same. It builds bridges where there were once walls. We start to see the same struggles reflected in the people around us, the same quiet search for meaning and authenticity, and this fosters a profound sense of empathy and shared humanity. We realize we were never alone in this. We were just too busy performing to notice. Together, we discover that the ultimate destination of this entire journey isn't some distant, perfect state of being. It's not about arriving at a point where all discomfort vanishes and life becomes effortlessly easy. The destination is, in fact, the journey itself. The ongoing, conscious and courageous practice of showing up as ourselves, moment to moment. It's about trading the rigid, brittle armor of a fixed identity for the flexible, resilient strength of self-awareness. It's about embracing the full, messy, beautiful spectrum of human experience without needing to filter it through a story that no longer serves you. This is where we find not just answers, but better questions. Not just peace, but a vibrant engagement with life. And in this space, we can finally understand the deep, simple truth that Henry David Thoreau pointed toward. That genuine liberation feels less like a triumphant conquest and more like a long-awaited homecoming. Like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit.